In this video, we're going to look at the Roger Federer-Rafael Nadal matchup. Now, we're pretty close to having a Federer-Rafa US Open final. That would be a great matchup, and we're going to look ahead to that. I'm going to assume, I predicted before the tournament that was what we were going to get, and we are, of course, a match away. Federer's got Djokovic in the semis, and Rafa's got Del Potro. And in a previous video, I talked about the Rafa-Del Potro matchup. And what I said Rafa was going to try and do was use his heavy topspin forehand to pull Del Potro. Let's say this is Del Potro. Pull him off the court, and then that, of course, opens up the rest of the court for Rafa to hit into. And this is a strategy Rafa has, of course, used against Federer as well. Federer struggles with those high balls to his one-handed backhand, and Rafa has used that with great success, pull Federer off the court, and Federer, of course, can't really do too much with that ball, and that opens up the rest of the court, and again, that is what has allowed Rafa to be so successful. Well, in the Madrid final, Federer made an adjustment, and I posed the question in that Nadal-Del Potro video, what exactly is Federer doing differently that allowed him to win that match? And the best answer I got, well, first of all, many of y'all said that Federer hit down the line much more often, and that prevented Nadal from generating these angles with his forehand. Nadal can't generate the same angle with his backhand, and he's hitting into Federer's forehand. So many of y'all hit the nail on the head with that one, but the best answer I felt like was from a guy, I guess, named Freddyn. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Freddyn, the 17th answer, the 17th comment. And we're going to get into exactly what he said in a second. But before we do that, I want to briefly talk about these icons again because they have led to some confusion. The icon, the circle, is the player, and the stick is the side of the body somebody's hitting on. So this would be, from our perspective, a righty's forehand. And then if you twist it around, that would be a righty's backhand. Just needed to clarify that. So what Federer would do is look for these down-the-line backhand-to-backhand rallies. Here's Rafa's backhand. Of course, he's lefty, so that's a lefty's backhand on the right-hand side. And here's Federer's backhand. And specifically, Federer was trying to get that ball deep somewhere in this box. And, of course, Rafa was trying to do the same thing. Now, what Federer would do, you'd have these down-the-line exchanges, and Federer would wait to run around and hit a forehand. And Federer would try and either crack that ball to the open court or come back down the line and maybe get a little bit of a weaker reply off of Rafa's backhand. And by going down the line like this and threatening to run around, the thing that Freddyn said that I thought was a great comment and absolutely true is that Nadal had to worry about his court positioning a little bit. Against a lot of guys, you see Nadal inch over so that he can eventually run around and hit a forehand. But because Federer could either run around and crack it to the open court, or if he got a short backhand, he could crack this ball cross court. And if he was able to get a solid, catch that ball real well, then he would go cross court with that backhand, and that'd be a pressing shot. Well, because of that, Nadal had to be a little bit more conservative. He had to stay closer to the tee to cover this, let's say Federer's aiming for this X. So he wasn't able to inch over and run around that ball as well. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, why didn't Nadal just employ this strategy and crack the ball cross court and do the exact same thing? Keep Federer a little bit more honest. Well, Nadal's game plan isn't really centered around that. Nadal's got a great two-handed backhand, but he's been hesitant in the past to hit the ball to Federer's forehand and apply that strategy. He would much rather break down Fed's backhand, so he would really stay away from trying to crack these balls cross court. And the thing is, if Nadal doesn't hit a good shot cross court, then he's hit to Fed's forehand. So if Nadal's cross court backhand doesn't pull Federer, let's say, past this line, I mean, this is a little arbitrary, but the point is you'd want to move Federer enough where he can't hit an aggressive forehand. Well, then he's going to be in trouble. If Federer's hitting a forehand somewhere in there, then he's going to be in good shape. So these little X's here are what I would say Nadal would want to aim for with that two-handed backhand, and these are relatively aggressive targets to go after. Now, assuming Nadal gets around on the forehand here, the same thing is true. See, the thing with Nadal's forehand is not as an aggressive shot, not as flat, it travels through the air longer, and since he doesn't hit it as hard, if the ball lands a little bit short and doesn't have that angle, then Federer is going to be able to do something with it on his forehand. So Nadal has to go for these targets which are relatively close to the line, and these are deep balls, or you have the angle here. So on those cross-court balls, Nadal has to do a lot with them. Now, Federer, on the other hand, he hits the ball flatter. So if Fed gets around this ball and hits a forehand, his target doesn't have to be as aggressive as Nadal's. He can go for the middle of this side of the court, pretty conservative, good 5 feet inside either line, and he just has to crack the ball pretty hard, and Nadal is probably not going to be able to do too much with that ball just given the pace. He's not going to be able to generate one of these ridiculous angles where Federer is now going to have to track a ball down over there. More likely, Nadal is going to put the ball somewhere in here, and then Federer is fine because he has a forehand and he's going to take control of the point. And, you know, you might say, well, Nadal could go down the line here. That's probably not going to happen if Federer gets a hold of a great forehand, if he hits a real flat forehand. So the technique these two guys use on their forehand sides influences what they're able to do on these cross-court balls. Again, because Federer hits that ball much more aggressively, he can take control of the point more effectively than Nadal can, who has a great forehand as well, but it's not a really hard forehand. He's not going to blow you off the court with it. Again, the strength of his forehand is all that topspin, the angle he can generate, and he can break down those folks with, well, all those righties with the balls up over their shoulders. So several of you may be wondering, well, this strategy I've just diagrammed, why don't more people use it? I mean, that's relatively simple. Just go down the line and then either wait for a shorter ball on the backhand that you can crack cross-court, or run around this ball and hit a forehand cross-court. Well, having a strategy is one thing, and being able to execute it is another. And the strategy I just diagrammed is extremely difficult to implement for several reasons. Difficult to implement against Rafa. You have to be able to do technically a couple things. First of all, you have to be able to hit deep down the line backhands, and specifically off of cross-court balls, because Federer will take a lot of cross-court forehands from Nadal, and assuming the angle isn't too great, assuming Federer is hitting it somewhere around here, that's where he redirects this over there. Well, that requires, like I said, an ability to change direction. And it's not just changing direction, it's changing direction and hitting the ball deep. Being able to hit sufficiently deep and sufficiently hard to prevent Nadal from doing something with that ball. Now, the second thing you have to be able to do is you have to be a great mover. Federer is arguably one of the best movers, if not the best mover ever in the history of the sport. You probably have Rod Laver up there as well. But Federer is able to move around this ball and be in position to take it cross-court. Someone like Del Potro is going to struggle doing that because he's not as quick, he's not as nimble as Federer is. And finally, you have to have that powerful and pressing forehand. You have to be able to hit a big shot, because if you don't have the placement and the pace on it, and you drop it somewhere in here, or you just don't hit a good enough shot in terms of the pace cross-court, well, that's not going to hurt Nadal at all. He'll go over and get that ball, and then a couple shots later, you're hitting from the seats over there. So being able to, understanding the strategy and being able to execute it are two different things. And if you go back and watch some of the footage of the Madrid final, I mean, Federer missed some of these balls and didn't always successfully execute that strategy. It's tough to do. So the final, assuming we get to an RFed-Rafa final, it's going to be about execution. If Nadal is able to keep a lot of backhands deep, hit those balls flat and make it difficult, cut down on the amount of time Fed has to try and run around these balls, or, and assuming Nadal hits the ball hard enough to prevent Federer from running around those balls, is Rafa also hitting backhands that are difficult to take cross-court? So it's just, like I said before, it's just a matter of execution, and whoever executes better is going to win that match. So I'm looking forward to it. I think both guys are going to get through. I think Federer's going to beat Djokovic. Rafa probably will beat Del Potro, but that ab issue, I mean, you don't know how that plays in with the serve and whether that spills into the rest of his game. So looking forward to it. I guess those matches are tomorrow, and hopefully we end up with the Rafa final. That would be a great matchup. First time on American soil in a major final, so really looking forward to it. Fingers crossed that we end up with that.